A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
On a Tuesday, every fortnight at least, we like to check in with Greg Bondar, who's national spokesperson for Christian Voice Australia. Hey, Greg, a special welcome back to 2020.
Oh, good morning, Neil. Thank you for the invitation to be with you again.
You know, I've got to check every time I talk to you or hear you, which hat are you wearing this week? Because you wear a whole bunch of different hats. You're on the board of a whole lot of different organisations, and a special honour to you for that, because you bring a whole wealth of experience to the opportunities you have to speak into various organisations, and you're on the board of the Australian Association for Religious Education. And you've been on the board for a little while. Today, in 2025, there's some special initiatives happening. What's happening for 2025 with CARE, C-A-R-E?
Yeah, thank you, Neil. Yes, I wear a number of hats, but I'm going to wear my Christian hat today, Neil, which is the hat I wear 24/7.
I always like to think of the Christian hair that is underneath whatever hat we might be wearing.
Exactly. Well, I've got a bit more than you, Neil, I think, but that's all right. But CARE is an interesting concept. Look, I'm on the board of the Religious Education Association. Look, this is very important now, because you and I both know that chaplaincy and religious educators are very much in the dark. Nobody knows much about them, what they do. But Neil, this year we're celebrating 50 years of religious education and chaplaincy in schools and universities and what have you. So it's a big year. And as you know, 50 years is nothing to be sort of laughed at. So what we're doing this year is, Neil, remembering all those people that are providing chaplaincy work, religious education, because quite frankly, Neil, they need to be recognised, and I'm urging everybody to make contact with anybody that's a chaplain or a religious educator in schools, Neil.
And, you know, depending on where you're listening today, your state or your territory, there's all sorts of different rules that states and territories have around chaplains and religious educators, and some are so under the thumb, they're almost not allowed to call themselves even chaplains. They're sort of relegated to being a welfare worker. Even the titles are under threat. So support for anyone who's working in chaplaincy and religious educator roles, this is sometimes, underappreciated, Greg.
Yeah, very much so. Well, interestingly, I was at a school in Canberra recently where the department there was called the Department of Religion and Values. And now that's interesting, because my values come from the Bible. But if values can, if you think they're self-imposed values, then we could have, 8 billion different value systems in place. So it's interesting, and you're quite right, that the term chaplain or religious educator is starting to change its shape now.
Okay, 2025, the year of CARE. So chaplains and religious educators, what are you intending to draw attention to for this year?
Look, in a nutshell, Neil, the problem we've got is that children, facing a lot of doubt, confusion in a secular society, as you know. The only way we can provide real hope is through chaplaincy and religious education. And Neil, I have to tell you, the whole foundation of Christianity starts at the school level, and if you go back in time, the church was responsible for educating children, meaning, and we go back centuries. The point I want to make here is, this is a piece of fact that I want to share with everybody. That did you know that 70% of Christians make their decisions to follow Christ before the age of 14, Neil? Now, that is incredible. So what does that say to you, Neil?
It says primary schools in particular and early high school is very, very important, and that's where there is that desire to have those chaplains and religious education happening in those schools. So schools are the environment you're talking about.
Absolutely, because look, my wife happens to be a part-time chaplain at her school, and we often have a chat. As you know, I'm a registered chaplain as well. I do a lot of chaplaincy work with either sport people or prisoners or whatever it may be. But the point I want to make, Neil, is that every parent, every grandparent should be aware that children need education from a religious perspective. And that religious perspective for us, Neil, would be, of course, a biblical perspective. So we're very much in favour of making sure that children do understand the Bible from a perspective. Now, that's not to say that other religions are not important. It is to those people that are of different faith. But for us, Neil, as a Christian, we're saying, hey, the foundation for all children starts at the school, at home, and religious education is critical for their upbringing and their worldview.
And it's not easy being a chaplain, not easy being a religious educator. If you are working in schools, there's this tightening that seems to be happening all the time. The things you can say, the things you can't. The regulations that are coming around you, just tightening continuously. You've got to have your wits about you, and you've got to have some level of purpose. This is not just sort of one of those things you do because, I've nothing better to do today. I think I'll just go and be a chaplain, or I'll go and teach RE. But there's got to be an intentionality, hasn't there? A purpose, even a calling to what you do. How do you describe the way that the heart of the chaplain or the religious educator actually ought to be?
Well, that is a great question, because it ought to be a pastoral role in many ways. When I give chaplaincy advice or comfort to people, my first thing is to ask people, "Are you okay?" And then we get into more sort of intense personal relationships. Can I pray for you? Maybe. But what comes to my mind, Neil, is, and people say this to me, Greg, why are you so confident in your lifestyle? And I say to them, 1 Peter 3:15, be prepared to give an answer for the salvation and hope that you have, Neil. And I think that's so critical, that we understand that we're prepared to give an answer for who we are as Christians.
Okay, 50th anniversary, and there is a website I'll give to listeners, aare.org.au. AARE, the Australian Association for Religious Education. You've got an initiative where you're looking to involve children or students to design some sort of an anniversary logo or badge. What's that all about?
Yeah, no, look, we thought, how do we engage with children Australia-wide? It doesn't matter what state you are, it doesn't matter whether you go to school or homeschooling. And by the way, homeschooling, Neil, as you know, is on the rise, People have had enough of the woke education that's currently in place, so they do a lot of homeschooling. So whether your child is at home or at a state school or a private school, we're asking them to just enter into a little competition, help us design an anniversary badge, for our 50th anniversary. And there is a prize, Neil. We're giving away $100 prizes for all those that are across the state, and then there's a grand prize of $500. It's not a lot, but I'll buy a lot of milkshakes, I guess, Neil,
Okay, and so that's, I'm sure there'll be families listening in, and they've got kids, and there's an artistic streak in those kids, and I know there'll be some parents who'll be thinking, okay, you can enter a competition here, a $100 prize, and then the overall winner a $500 prize. Nothing to be sneezed at. No. The design, though, it's going to be, is there any particular elements that need to be a part of this design?
Yes, Neil, there is a template and submission guidelines which can be found on our website, and the competition closes 30th of June 2025. So if you go to the website, aare.org.au, you'll find the details. But what we're really asking for is to get the children, the school children, and even a short university, I guess, maybe. I'm not sure of the different categories, but the year of care is what we're looking for. Year of care is so important that we get across this message to the public, to government, to schools, to parents, that there is care, and that care is through chaplains and religious educators now. Okay, it's
aare.org.au if you've got children, and a competition there to design a badge. Hey, some other things you've been thinking about, and I know that Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has been at the Vatican yesterday, had an audience with the new Pope, Pope Leo XIV. You've been reflecting on some of the significance of the appointment of the new Pope through the papal enclave system. What have you been contemplating?
Yeah, well, Neil, this sort of came to mind because I don't know if you saw the film Conclave at all, Neil. You know,
I'm aware of it, but I haven't seen it. But yes, I know what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah, well, you'll have to see it because I don't want to ruin it for you. But quite frankly, it's either a brilliant film or it's one that you might think as a Christian that is actually attacking Christianity again, saying that you can be anybody you want to be. And the film sort of can be either a criticism of Catholicism, or it can be something that you embrace. But what's happened is that I said, well, I better have a look at this again. So I looked at the election of the Pope, and I didn't realise it is the most geographically diverse church in the 2000 history of the Pope's inauguration. So Neil, and I didn't realise that there'll be around about 70 clerics that will be participating or did participate in that particular election. Now, one thing that came to me, Neil, I want your opinion on this as well, because where did the word conclave come from?
Okay, yep.
Now, I know you do, but let me explain.
Yep, you give us the story.
Oh, look, I could talk about this for a while because it really fascinated me. In the year 1268, the cardinals gathered to elect a new pope, Neil, and they became deadlocked and continued meeting, now you ready, for almost 3 years. Well, at that time, the local magistrates and residents became so frustrated, they said, right, we're going to lock you all up. All you cardinals are going to be locked up, and we're not going to let you out until a decision is reached. Hence the word conclave, which is a Latin term meaning with a key. So that's the way the conclave, that's why you can't go in or come out. And I didn't realise also that only cardinals under the age of 80 are eligible to vote. So there's a bit of history for you, Neil, on what's happening, but more significantly, we'll talk about what does all this mean for us as Christians?
Well, it is a globally televised news headline around the conclave and the election of a new pope. Yep. And whether you are Protestant or Catholic, the fact that the Pope is the most influential Christian leader in the world has got to be a very, very important element that you recognise, no matter whether that's your flavour or not. So what's in your thoughts here, the relevance of the conclave, the election of the Pope, and the global influence that it has? Where do you start with that?
Look, Neil, I have to admit, originally my mother was a Catholic, Neil. My father was a Methodist. I married an Anglican wife. My brother married a Jewish girl. So I've got a pretty much vested interest in all the religions, Neil. The point I want to make is that whilst I'm not 100% in agreement with the Catholic Church on a lot of topics, that's something that I'm prepared to overlook because, quite frankly, Neil, the Pope is going to have some great influence on the cultural significance far outside its own church. And in particular, Neil, you and I both know, we talk about it daily, churches and entire denominations are endorsing abortion, same-sex marriage, LGBTIQA ideology, euthanasia. So whatever our Pope decides to take on as a social issue, it's going to have big and huge significance worldwide, Neil.
And interesting, because the Pope will have such a significant voice. If he wants to, as he says, unite the Catholic Church, he can certainly unite Catholics and Protestants if he gets things right when it comes to a biblical sound position on those issues that you mentioned, around abortion or same-sex marriage or LGBTQ ideology, euthanasia. You mentioned those issues. Catholic Church has been very strong on those, and it's not that the Protestant Church is any less strong, but the Pope, as a significant global Christian leader, does lead the way on those. So if you get woke Pope and weakness on those, he'll lose respect. If he's going to gain some level of unity, he'd have to come out with a pretty strong position on those. I don't think he has come out with any positions on these yet.
No.
But gradually that'll happen.
And that's the point I want to make, Neil, that, we've got to make sure that the Pope is acting in such a way that churches don't dismiss biblical authority, Neil. It's important. And I have to congratulate the Roman Catholic Church because, quite frankly, they have stood by the sanctity of life and marriage in many ways. So that is to be commended. But, Neil, the Pope can have a huge influence worldwide, especially from a biblical perspective, because whatever he says or does, the 1.4 billion Catholics will follow that direction. So, Neil, it's going to have huge impact for all of us.
Come back to the conclave for a moment. The headline we were all watching was they're considering a new pope. The reality of what was happening behind the scenes is that they were discerning who would be God's choice for navigating all the turbulence on the issues that are facing the world. So when you mention all of those biblical, ethical dilemmas that the Pope's got to go to, I imagine the cardinals were not just thinking about a leader. They weren't just talking about one person. They were saying who best fits the ability to be able to stand firm on those issues. And this is the man, Pope Leo, they've come up with.
Yeah, Neil, my view has always been with the conclave that when these cardinals are voting, they ought to vote according to God's direction and leading, not leaning on their own understanding. And I think that's something that I would always argue for. But you're quite right. The moral issues, the social issues are going to drive the current Pope into making decisions that may dismiss biblical authority. That could worry me, but I'm praying that it'll continue on, with the sanctity of life, marriage, the importance, the foundation, and that the next, I'm not sure how long he's going to be there, but Neil, is going to have a big impact on which direction he decides to go.
And, of course, this thought of praying for the leader of your denomination, and I think you're about to say, we'll pray for the Pope, but I'll almost, I'm not a betting man, but I would say a lot of people would actually be thinking, I don't even know the leader of my own denomination, and now you're saying pray for the Pope, and he's a Catholic, and I'm a Protestant, and, sometimes they don't see eye to eye, but I guess pray for the Pope, but also find out who the leader of your denomination is so that you can include them in your prayers. Any further to add on that?
Absolutely, Neil. Look, quite frankly, as you know, both at Christian Voice Australia and Every Home for Christ, I always pray for Christian leaders. I also pray for leaders of government, and I really pray hard for Albanese, I have to tell you. So I keep praying for him, keep praying for all the opposition leader as well. Neil, it's important that we have godly government. And it's important that we have godly leaders. Have a look at the Archbishop of Canterbury, for goodness sake, and I pray hard for him as well.
Okay. Now, so for listeners, I mentioned a website earlier, the AARE website for the Australian Association for Religious Education. You might have kids or teens who might want to enter that art design competition that Greg mentioned, aare.org.au. Connect with Greg Bondar at everyhomeforchrist.org.au, and we'll often hear his political insights as spokesperson for ChristianVoiceAustralia.com.au. You wear a number of hats, Greg, but, we don't hold it against you. I think it's one of your strengths. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us once again today on 2020.
God bless you, Neil. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.